And if you would like to give an invocation, or if you like your clergy leader to give an invocation, please let us know. We'd love to have them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deacon Rush to help center us.
All right, good evening. This comes from Pope Francis encyclical 2015 Laudato Si, which translated means praise be to you. Subtitle on care of our common home. A prayer for our earth. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen.
Thank you so much, Deacon Rush. Really appreciate that and helping center us. So with that, we have to do the work. Now that we're centered and we know what we are up against, and also how much wonderful beauty there is in the world. I think it's really, really important work that we do, where we help connect our faith to action. And so a part of what HIPL is really focused on is helping give us real tools to help put those moral calls into action. And so with that, I'd like to move to introduce Ray Wilson, our board chair, and he will introduce today's speaker, Dan, and give us a little more context for what we're going to hear today.
Thank you, Dory. So yes, I'm going to introduce Dan York, who's a senior fellow at American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, engaged primarily in utilities and local policy, research, and technical assistance. He focuses on tracking and analyzing trends and emerging issues in utility sector energy conservation programs. Dan has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Minnesota, and he has a master's and PhD degrees from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and both of those are in the area of land resources with an emphasis on energy analysis and policy. And he joined ACEEE in 2001, and I happened to have a sneak peek at the slides that he's going to present, and I'm very excited about what we're going to hear. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dan.
Very good. Let me get my screen up here. Yeah, good evening, everyone. So there, is it showing up okay?
Looks great.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate your interest in action in this area of working towards a clean energy economy. Been at this for a bit myself, and I've seen a lot of changes over my career. So happy to share a few thoughts on what we do. First, my organization, just a very brief note, it's based in Washington, D.C., American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. If that doesn't scream that we are a bunch of wonks, I don't know what does. But we have our share of geeks too. I distinguish the wonks are the policy folks, the geeks are the technical folks. But we do a whole host of things to advance energy efficiency policies, programs, technologies, investments, and behaviors. We do a lot of conferences and an endless stream of reports on all things energy efficiency. So everything we do is available to the public, and we encourage you to check us out sometime. All right, so kind of just my understanding of your interests and just kind of taking a deeper look at energy efficiency and how that fits into this emerging clean energy, low carbon future that we're all hoping for. So we view energy efficiency as a resource, and in fact, that it had things not changed back in the 70s, we'd be using a heck of a lot more, and I'll show you that in a second. But because of energy efficiency, we save more energy each year than we use, had those trends continued, and we'll get to that in a second. But just what do we mean by energy efficiency? We view it as the use of less energy to do the things we all enjoy, whether that's chilling our beverages or heating our homes, cooling our homes, especially this summer times, or just everything throughout the economy. But there are ways to do just about anything that we have in our homes and buildings and our transportation systems that can be done more efficiently, use less energy, and there's no change in the outputs that we want. So here's what I was talking about in terms of the role of energy efficiency in the economy, where this upper line, if back in the 70s, and this is actually about, I graduated in 77. I'm sure many of you too are around for some of those oil crises of the 70s, and that just kind of first raised energy as an issue. But had those trends continued up this red line, we'd be way deep in a lot more energy infrastructure and generation plants and the whole bit. But instead, we tracked this much lower line. And so this gap is what we talk about, the energy efficiency resource. There's a little bit more to that, but that's the basic thing. And what we were able to do is essentially decouple energy use, which is this lower red line here, from GDP growth, which is this upper blue line. And especially post World War II up to the 70s, GDP and energy use just grew in lockstep. People just said, well, if we're going to have a healthy economy, booming economy, we're going to just, it takes energy. But we kind of proved that that doesn't have to happen. And here's what did happen. And some of it's certainly structural change. We don't produce as much steel and heavy industry as we used to, but so there's been that. But also this big chunk of reduced energy use is through improved energy efficiency. You look around your homes, and our lighting and our refrigerators and our home heating and cooling are all a lot more efficient than they were back in the 70s. So that all adds up. And that's part of the challenge of energy efficiency. It's just a lot of little things that add up to big numbers, but you got to do those little things and some big ones. So we view energy efficiency. I do a lot of outdoor activities. Actually, after this webinar here or meeting, I'm going to be going teaching a kayak lesson. So enjoy the outdoors. And so a Swiss Army knife multi-tool. So we look at energy efficiency as the right answer, an important part of it for doing a whole host of things, addressing rising energy costs, using this rising costs to produce or purchase electricity that's looking at wholesale markets and generation, addressing new resource needs. And you'll show some slides that a lot of places have met growth by just reducing demand, and that's a fundamental driver and foundation of what we do. That you can either add more supply or reduce demand, and reducing demand is a heck of a lot cleaner and can be a lot cheaper. Meeting environmental objectives, not just greenhouse gas emissions, but anything to do with generation from fossil fuels and other impacts. Reliability, when having a system that's not stressed out to the max and has more flexibility can improve reliability. So it can't necessarily turn the lights back on, but it can help prevent them from going out. And California ran that experiment back in the early 2000s, where their whole system was stressed out to the max for a whole host of reasons. And the contributions of energy efficiency in hindsight literally kept those lights on. So that was good. Economic development, talk about green jobs, a lot of the things, almost all the things to do with energy efficiency are local jobs. You can't outsource insulating your house or putting up solar panels or whatever. So energy equity, we want very much more concerned and aware of the energy burdens on our lower and moderate income households, and that can really stretch and make people make very unfortunate choices between other household needs, whether it's food, rent, or energy. And then just healthier indoor environments. They're learning a lot more about the importance of avoiding a whole host of indoor pollutants that can come from some devices. All right, so here's the cost. Here's when we talk about this is a very wonky slide, but actually it's pretty simple. All it's doing is on the bottom here, it just identifies the type of energy resource from gas peaking turbines to gas combined cycle units and nuclear, coal, on down. But over here in the green, I had to pick green, you can figure out the cost of a saved kilowatt hour, because generally you invest in that maybe more efficient technology, it costs a little bit more. That's not always the case, but in many cases it is. And you just figure out the payback in simple economic terms. But energy efficiency clocks in at really the cheapest of all these resources, including wind and solar. Although you notice, if had I done this talk, 5 years ago, this would have been a lot higher, and same with wind. So, and I'll get to that in a little bit, just about how there's important synergies between energy efficiency and the rapid growth of renewables. So that's important to understand. So my organization does quite a bit with just trying to keep track of what happens at the state level. So maybe some of you have seen our annual state energy efficiency scorecards, and it just is a way to look at the states, and there are different policies, and it crosses many different areas that can be influenced. So we look at utility regulation, the policies and programs for customer energy efficiency, look at transportation policies. Clearly, transportation is a big user of energy, and it's one of the hardest to tackle for efficiency. Building energy efficiency policies, so building codes is another area. What state government does, we talk about leading by example, as if state government can kind of show the rest of its residents and industries and businesses that it can operate its facilities very efficiently, or specify as they procure materials and services that energy efficiency is included. And then some states even put in appliance efficiency standards above what happens at the federal level. That's less common, but California, and there's a few other states that have done that. So our scorecard, sorry if that top gets cut off a little bit, but this is just showing that in our scorecard, and I'll show you the results in a minute. This just shows how the different points are allocated, but it's just a short way of saying that this is a multi-dimensional scoring, and this is the result. So Indiana there is ranked 37th nationally. Number 1, maybe no surprise, is California. 2 is Massachusetts, because they've got a whole range of very aggressive policies tackling energy efficiency throughout their economy across those dimensions that I just showed you there. In my own state, sadly, has fallen from grace. There was a time it actually was in the top 10, but we've had kind of we haven't moved ahead. We're kind of stuck in place, and other states have moved ahead. Michigan has come way up. It's really quite a leader, and Illinois likewise has come up quite a bit. But here, just showing the Midwestern rankings by our scoring. So this axis is just our own scores. But so Indiana's kind of here. Iowa used to be a lot higher, but they passed some really damaging legislation that pretty much killed their customer energy efficiency programs. And here just shows the trajectory back. When I started with ACEEE, nationwide spending was just about $1 billion a year. And this is just for utility efficiency programs. And then a lot of this growth came from the Midwest. Illinois, Michigan, and other states really came on strong after not doing much here. So nationally now we're up towards $8 billion a year through electricity and natural gas programs offered through utilities, or in some cases, there's a non-utility organization that runs those programs. Here in Wisconsin, for instance, we have this statewide program called Focus on Energy. It's funded through utility customers, but instead of having utilities do the programs, there's this statewide approach. And Oregon and Vermont also have that approach. There's a couple others. But again, you know, we like to say energy efficiency is free, but it's not. Does have some cost, but here's what it saves. So no surprise, a very similar cost or savings curve. So this is, you know, each one of those kilowatt hours it's saved is one that didn't have to be generated by whatever source. So that's what we love to see. All right. And just drilling down into just the electricity sector, those savings nationwide now are saving contributing essentially a virtual 18% power plant to the total needs of the system. So again, those little savings do add up to big amounts in the end, and we kind of forget that. So now just going to switch gears a little bit, just talk about electrification, which is really greening of the grid, getting rid of coal and other fossil fuels, and also not just the generation fuels, but getting them out of our households too. That one's just offers great opportunity, but that's going to be a big lift for any of us. Like I'm in Wisconsin, so our cold winters, but the modern heat pumps, there's cold climate heat pumps that are proving themselves to be able to handle that, but it's going to take some consumer saving. Now this is a cost curve. Again, sorry we cut off the top, but the McKinsey Institute is a really high caliber research firm, and you're never going to read all these little things there. And I always say it when people say that when they're making presentations. But the reason I put this up there, it just shows over here are essentially negative costs for reducing carbon, and meaning that these energy efficiency measures pay for themselves already just on pure economic grounds. And then you factor in that they're also reducing carbon. And so it's essentially a negative cost to reduce carbon. And then going up, and you'll see that some of the more advanced, like coal power plants with all kinds of advanced technologies winds up being a lot more expensive to reduce carbon. So that's why we like energy efficiency is in this corner of being, it pays for itself just on strict economic terms without considering the carbon reductions, but it also reduces carbon. So it's a double win. And then our organization just came out with a report kind of documenting and advocating for how to get to this low zero carbon future. And we say that we can meet half of that by just improved energy efficiency, and that's again across a number of uses of our energy, appliances and equipment, zero energy buildings. Boy, that's another development that 20 years ago you would have been considered completely nuts if you talked about buildings in any climates that were zero energy, and now we're putting them up, and it's a reality. So that's just one of many great advances. Just building improvements, that's one of the biggest areas, is just improving the efficiency of existing buildings, and that's a harder in many ways than starting from scratch for new construction, but also industrial efficiency, vehicles, etc. So doing all these things could get us halfway to that zero carbon, low carbon future. And here's where energy efficiency has to work with the cleaner grid. And so here's the chunk, from energy efficiency. This is work done by the Natural Resources Defense Council, but then we can reduce demand and then use renewable resources to have zero carbon production. And then we electrify some of those end uses where we have natural gas furnaces and boilers and gas ranges and things, and continued decarbonization. And so we can get that down there, but we can't get there without this big chunk of efficiency. And that's something I'll just say I'm a big fan of solar and wind, and that got me into this energy world in the beginning. But they have to go hand in hand. We can't just, if we ignore the demand, that renewable energy can't get us there, even though it's come way down in price. And this just shows as the greening of the grid that we're reducing coal use, and meanwhile up comes the non-carbon wind and photovoltaics, and that's just great advances there. So again, the synergies of efficiency and electrification, again, not just with renewables, but as we electrify, by making our buildings more efficient, you reduce the size of systems that you need to heat and cool those and provide lighting. So again, efficiency really is critical for that. And then again, at the system level, as we get more electrified, there's ways that the buildings and our appliances and equipment will be even interactive with the grid. So the grid can send out signals to say, hey, air conditioners, cycle off for a while here, we got a problem, or whatever. So there's a lot of kind of gee-whiz technologies that are being shown to work, making our grid a lot more flexible and reliable. And that's all coming under the demand response. I shouldn't leave abbreviations in there, but that's just programs that will cycle off units, or just provide that. You want to clip some of that peak load when you get these hot summer days and things like that. So, and this just showing that location matters where you're electrifying and decarbonizing the grid. Midwest, no surprise, shows up. You can get some big carbon reductions, but the Northwest is all hydropower, so electrifying there doesn't get you as much carbon reductions, but the big targets are here in the Midwest, and going to the east, the PJM system, these circles represent the amount of carbon that can be reduced by electrification. So just being aware, and again, the Midwest, no surprise. And so strategies for improving efficiency will be wrapping up here, and we'll be welcoming some questions. One thing we advocate is some kind of, we call them energy efficiency resource standards. Just think of that. You're probably familiar with renewable energy portfolio standards, where you set a target for the amount of renewable energy you want to be produced. Well, you can do the same for efficiency and say that, well, you want to save 1% of previous year's demand through efficiency, and a number of states have those standards in place. So it's hard to meet a goal if you don't have a goal. So it's just driving those programs to achieve high savings. Building codes is another area, and not just establishing the codes, but making sure they're enforced. Because we don't, the worst thing we can do is put up inefficient new buildings. So you want to make sure the new buildings are as efficient as possible within constraints, but they've really advanced. Here's one for emissions on cars and trucks, and reducing vehicle miles traveled, improve vehicle efficiency. And then we want to make sure that the clean energy transition serves all customers, not just those at the top of the heap. So we want to make sure that those benefits of a clean energy economy accrue to all customers, and especially those that are overburdened by energy costs. So closing thoughts. Again, I can't say this enough, and we just can't get to that zero low carbon future without a big push for continued savings from efficiency. And the cheapest, cleanest kilowatt hour is generally the one you never produce, a negawatt hour, if you will, of energy. And I had to put the qualifier in there because 5 years ago, I'd probably say it's absolutely the cheapest kilowatt hour, but some solar on the margins and wind power is coming in occasionally where they've got more on the grid being generated than they have demand. So they actually shed load or have negative costs, which is a weird thing to think about. But at any rate, it's still on bulk of that's low cost of energy efficiency has been proven time and time again, and that there's still a large unrealized potential for energy efficiency. We get a lot of pushback or some pushback by people saying, well, we've already got all the stuff that's easy and cheap, so there's not that much left. And it just kind of refills the well, because new technologies oftentimes leapfrog previous standard technologies and can be much more efficient. And you just have to look at the world of lighting, for instance, just to see that, you know, we had incandescents, which were really very inefficient. Then we got CFLs, and fluorescent lighting, which is more efficient, but had its problems. And now with LED lighting and digital technologies, it's just taken another leap, and it's much better and more controllable. And there's just all kinds of fun things you can do with it. And that we also have this solid, well-established legacy of advances in programs. You know, I know Indiana's had some programs in the past. I can't recall exactly what's in place now, but we've got these customer programs in many places that are not only saving customers, but it just is a better way for utilities to really connect with their customers and make it seem like there's somebody trying to help them rather than just send them a monthly bill. And then the new technologies are creating new opportunities, but we can't forget about the old reliable ones, the low tech. You know, insulating your attic is pretty low tech, but you know, that's probably one of the most important things to do for saving energy in the household. So we want to make sure that continues, both new and old tech, sorry. So resources, some takeaways. Again, I encourage you to check out our publications. Sometimes if you have trouble finding something, contact me or one of our staff, and we can help you wind your way through. We like to think our website's reasonably well organized, but sometimes, you know, you might miss something. And then we have a number of conferences. Sadly, this year they're all virtual, but they're coming back next year in person. We have our state efficiency scorecards and state policy toolkits. So especially for you, those of you, it sounds like all working kind of on some of these state level issues with utility planning and whatnot. A lot of those tools can be very helpful. Other organizations, this is just off the top of my head, some that I think do really good related policy and advocacy work. Natural Resources Defense Council, Rocky Mountain Institute, they really do a lot with some of the leading edge technologies and showing what's possible, working with business and industry, private industry. The Regulatory Assistance Project, especially when you're getting involved with regulatory proceedings at this, I know, let's see, Dory mentioned that there's some integrated resource planning happening. The Regulatory Assistance Project are just, it's just a wonderful organization. They're mostly ex-regulators who now are in a position to offer good advice and guidance to other regulators, both the commissioners and staff, so that they can pass along that great institutional knowledge that sometimes gets lost or often gets lost with regulatory institutions. The New Buildings Institute does a lot of interesting work for leading edge technologies for buildings to make them net zero energy and things like that. And then here's my contact information, and I'm welcome inquiries afterwards if you think of things or need some guidance. We're always helpful to reach out and steer you along, because we're still a small, well, we've gotten a lot bigger. We're about 60 people now, but we're a national organization, so we need people like you all in doing the good work locally. So with that, thank you for this opportunity and for your interest, and I really wish you good luck for all that you're doing. So with that, I'll stop and take questions.
Thank you, Dan. I don't see any questions, I think, in the chat. Does anyone want to raise their hand and we can take you off mic and answer a question you might have at this point? Yes, David.
Need to unmute.
Yeah, can you unmute yourself, David?
Or maybe we need to take off the
There we
system. There we go. Gotcha.
Are you working in connection with the federal infrastructure improvements, the projections for what they want to do?
Oh yeah, yeah. We've got a whole team. I mean, ACEEE, we're organized kind of in program areas, we call them, and one is federal policy, and we've got several people who are very active on anything to do with federal policy, and got good connections with the Department of Energy and US EPA. So yes.
So are you involved in improvements in the electrical grids in various states or across the country?
That varies. We do get involved in state level work on a selective basis. If we see a good opportunity where our involvement could help move something ahead, usually working or almost always working with some local groups. Like we're heavily involved in some proceedings in Florida where there was an opportunity to change some regulations and policies that could advance efficiency. The grid related work, we're not so much involved with. We follow it and occasionally get involved. I know our executive director has been involved with some things at the federal level, the FERC and thing, but it varies.
Any other questions by anyone?
We have a question, Elsa and then Joe.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the opening, the invocation of this meeting that mentioned Laudato Si, which talks a lot about the impact of sort of a throwaway culture that's developed. And I feel like even in terms of thinking about conservation, it's often a lot more exciting to think about moving on to the next big thing than slowing down and figuring out what we can actually remove and save. So I'm curious, all of this data is fantastic, but beyond the data, what strategies do you use to get people excited about conservation and not just innovation, I suppose?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, excellent question. And we actually have a team that works on behavioral change. And every year we help launch a conference. We call it our Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference. And you're right on target as far as I view energy efficiency as going through different phases where we sort of, first thought it was just a technical problem. If we just create a better mousetrap or a more efficient device, that's all we need. And then I could go through all those, but there came a point, maybe 15 years, or we've recognized it for forever, really, that behavior is a big part of the solution and the way that we use energy. It's not just having a more efficient car, but maybe figuring out how to use that car less and things like that. So it's carried over into the approaches that utilities are using for programs. I don't know if this is in place by your utilities, Indiana, but these home energy reports, because once upon a time, even today, most utility bills are undecipherable by anyone, even with a PhD like me. But instead, they've realized we need to provide consumers the right information in a way that can inspire them to make changes, so that these home energy reports provide you your energy use in a very graphic format, and then it compares yours to similar homes to just show you, well, are you better than your neighbors, or essentially trying to motivate people to show that they can reduce their energy use through not just efficiency, but we call conservation those behaviors that reduce the use of your vehicle, or make other lifestyle changes and things like that. So I've heard that's so that's an important part of that. I think especially in transportation, that's one of the thorniest problems we have is getting a net zero energy building would feel really good, but then if you commute 100 miles each way or something, you kind of negate that benefit. But so yes, it's a ripe area, and that conference, I'd highly recommend it. It's really engaging. A lot of academics and as well as policy and program people, but they're very much thinking about those choices that we all make. So thank you.
Joe.
Dan, thank you very much for the presentation. That was wonderful. And again, yeah, a lot of that data is so fascinating to look at. I found myself squinting and hoping for a little extra time on each slide just to digest everything that was there. I wanted to follow up on David's question related to the federal infrastructure plans and proposals. Could you maybe just give a little bit of your impression on that, if you have any related to perhaps what you've seen or heard that you like the most, and what might be coming down the pike, and perhaps what you're most disappointed that's there or that's not there that you would have liked to have seen?
Well, I'll start with a caveat: is that I don't. My field isn't so much that federal policy, but from what I've seen from a little bit more of a distance, I think there's a great, the good parts of it, or the especially attractive, is first recognizing that we've got a lot to do across many different ways that we use energy. And one of the primary ones, and it's been very tough to tackle, is just retrofitting our homes. Most of our homes and buildings were built before there were stringent energy codes, and people are resistant to invest in that insulation and some of those things that don't have any obvious curbside appeal compared to other things you do in your home. So that home retrofits is a big thing, but I think they're recognizing that and trying to provide incentives and goals that will address that. I think it's great that we're back on track with getting appliance and appliance and equipment standards back on track. Under the previous administration, let's just say that they rolled back and halted some of those advances, and unfortunately, just requiring more stringent and higher efficiencies for some of the common technologies used in our homes, whether it's furnaces or air conditioners or refrigerators, makes a big difference. So that's another very positive direction. And I think the same as, we're getting back on track for boosting vehicle efficiency. And then I think the greening of the grid and the continued push for renewables, that goes hand in hand with advances in energy efficiency and clean energy jobs. And I think the way that they're highlighting the jobs impacts of this transformation is also on target. There's different analyses that have done by various groups showing the very real clean energy or jobs benefits of clean energy. And something I think that often gets kind of forgotten in that is, yes, it's certainly the people that go out to homes, the engineers and contractors who build new buildings that are efficient or retrofit old ones. But then, especially in the Midwest, I always think, we're the manufacturing hub of much of the country. And so the people who make refrigerators and air conditioners and energy efficient windows and insulation, if you go down the list of the suppliers of that kind of equipment, so many of them are in the Midwest. So there are manufacturing jobs associated with producing that stuff too. So a lot of good there. Disappointments, I guess just that it takes so long. It can take so long to get through and get things done, but some new positive developments too. One, there's now an undersecretary in the Department of Energy position on energy equity, and so we're, advances like that, things that many of us had thought about before, but it just hadn't risen to that cabinet level position. So they're clearly emphasizing that this clean energy transition has to reach all. So that's great.
I'm going to jump in here now because I want to make sure we get to hear from Molly and George.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully we'll have some time at the end, and if we do run over our hour, if anyone needs to leave, they'd be able to do that at that point. So I'd like to introduce Molly O'Donnell. Molly is at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bloomington, that's where she attends. And I know Molly for a number of years because she and I worked together very heavily in the early days of HIPPL just to put together our energy conservation programs. And we've presented many education events together. And I'd just like to ask Molly if she'd share one or two little stories or snippets of what's going on in her congregation, or some story that she'd like to just share. So it's all yours, Molly.
Okay, thanks. So I kind of made myself a list of things that we've done and kind of what was important to do first, second, and third, or fourth. So the first thing we did was had actually a home audit or home assessor who'd never done a church. This is before I joined the church. So he did walk through the church with the Green Sanctuary Task Force members. And I know one of the things that happened out of that was insulation blown into the attic. But then as Ray and I were learning about things, we realized that sealing gaps was really important. So that was the next thing that we did, is sealed around ceiling fixtures on the upper floors and around windows. And we added like a foam core insulation on the attic hatches, which otherwise had just been a piece of wood. And then I was involved in a green spaces initiative where we did a lot of renovation. And one of the things that I was in charge of was we were replacing a whole wall of windows with very efficient windows and also window shades. But I talked them into just putting an insulated wall in one portion. It was a room, and actually it was a good thing. No one ever noticed. No one in the congregation ever commented on it, but it allowed the piano, which had been in a window now, to be protected from light. So that's the building envelope. And then the next thing, actually, I became chair of building and grounds. I think it was supposed to start, with the fiscal year, but before that happened, the sanctuary air conditioner went out. And I think everybody thought it was me, trying to save energy. But and I knew, because I had studied for our solar panel grant, which I think that's where I first met Ray, that the office equipment was also very old, and you couldn't get the system for the sanctuary out and a new one in without replacing the one for the office. So I had already studied all, what was the most efficient. This was in 2013. And then we just have a policy now, whenever anything is ready to be replaced, we just, whatever's the most efficient. That first time, we actually have changed suppliers for our HVAC, because they didn't even tell us about the most efficient, because it was more expensive and they thought it wouldn't pay for itself. But that's we really wanted to save as much as we could. So from then on, we've been sure to get the most efficient. Thermostats is another thing, very low cost to install programmable ones. And then we programmed them so that when we have 9 HVAC systems, and actually I'll get to that, but so we set the temperatures back, meaning in the summer to be warmer at night and in the winter to be colder at night. And during the week when the spaces, and Saturdays when the spaces aren't being used, then they're down, and then they can be programmed to come up so that by the time people arrive on Sunday, the air is comfortable. Then I created signs that we hung in rooms that had thermostats, explaining what other rooms that thermostat controlled, because the zones often have 4 to 8 rooms that are smaller offices or smaller classrooms that are controlled by the same thermostat. And I also asked the staff and I've told the members several times to consider holding your weekday meeting in a room that's already being conditioned. So we don't have to cool a room just for your meeting or just for 2 meetings when there's 5 meetings in another room that's available. So that's a behavioral change, and it's been a battle. Behavior is hard to change. And we've also done things like converted lighting. At first it was to fluorescent, and then pretty quickly LEDs came way down and more cost effective, and we've installed LEDs and no longer have any incandescent lights. And we've also put in motion sensors, especially in rooms that have fans that go on when the lights go on. So we've been saving, well, we have 2 solar installations, and after the second one, we've offset or covered 90% of our electricity. Of course, we still have natural gas. And now we're looking at carbon offsets to meet our Paris pledge, which is to be carbon neutral by 2050, by which time I'll be 100, or I'll be 99 years old. So anyway, that's kind of our history and the things that I thought of that had the most impact.
Thank you, Molly.
Molly,
And you all should know that their energy, their what do I want to say? Their
Square foot.
no, the Energy Star number for your congregation always is hovering at like 79 or 97 or 98 or something like that.
In the 90s, when they changed the system, made it harder, then it went down, but we worked back up. So,
So, all right.
Ray, we have 2 quick questions for Molly, if okay.
Sure.
One is, what are your temperature set points and thermostat tips? And also, can you comment on prevention maintenance and filter changes?
Okay, yeah, so we have preventive maintenance twice a year. And one thing I forgot to mention is that there's one area, the oldest part of the church, it's 2 levels. In the lower level, we took out the gas furnace and put in mini splits, electric, so that because we were creating so much solar, so we thought we might as well cover that with our solar. And I guess that's what Dan means by electrification. So we've done that much. So let's see. And what was the other question? I'm sorry. This is my brain. I forget what you asked.
Temperature set points.
Oh boy, I can't remember them exactly because it's been, we set them up in 2013 and I can't remember exactly, but something like 55 at night in the winter. And I can't remember if it's in the 80s in the summer at night and during the week. Yeah, we had to make, go ahead.
I think we pretty much agreed on, you can definitely go down to 50 without any harm in the winter. And I know at my congregation, we do that. And then I think we just set it at 85 so the air conditioner doesn't run in the summertime, basically, until we need to cool the space. Yeah.
So we have some rooms we have trouble with humidity, and so we have to either run dehumidifiers or the AC. So,
Again, thank you very much, Molly.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to George Friedley at this point. He's with the Fellowship of Hope in Elkhart, Indiana. I don't know too much about George, but I do know a little bit about his congregation. They are participating with Energy Stewards, and I know that they have an Energy Star rating for their facilities of 96, which doesn't get too much better than that. And they do have solar panels, and I heard by the grapevine that George spends some of his spare time going up to volunteer at Camp Friedenswald in Michigan. So George, tell us what's going on at your congregation.
Okay, yeah. Our congregation, we're in a building that's over nearly 120 years old. We got it about 30 years ago. When we got it, we did a lot of work with insulation and so on, and as a result, then more recently we did some window replacement, and we did an addition so that we were basically looking at ways to keep it efficient, make it most efficient so it's well insulated. Our cooling system is a little bit different. We've never gotten air conditioning in the building. What we have is just taken an air handler from an old furnace, and it was a small congregation, 30 some people about. We have another congregation that rents our building as well, so the building does get used quite a bit. But we just put an air handler in and put a thermostat on it so that at 4 o'clock in the morning, if it's warm in the building, it just exchanges the air in the sanctuary, and that's the main, the largest part of the building. Solar panels, we got them as a gift. There was a member that had a system that was, they just needed more capacity, and the efficiency of the panels could be increased with newer panels. And so the system was donated to the church, and then and they were able to, and there's plenty of space. So efficiency of space is not the situation where the other individual had, there just was not enough roof space for low efficiency solar panels. So that's how we got them. That's producing about half the electricity we're needing. The system we also have has consumption monitoring. One of the one of the things about the consumption monitoring is you can kind of see the signatures of different appliances and so on. And when you get a little bit used to it, you can kind of figure it out. And as a result, we saw that the water heater, electric water heater, was coming on at intervals, and we just took and put insulation on the outside of the electric water heater, and then that made the intervals expand out over a longer period of time. And they also had a smaller water heater that just did a sink in one room, and just doing that did the same thing there. Any questions or anything of that nature?
George, how have you involved your congregation in behavioral changes?
I think it's just that we're all kind of aged. One of the large businesses that our congregation had was a construction company, and as a result, people were kind of much aware of that and it was back 30 years ago, it was working on high efficiency housing. And so it's kind of been a part of the nature of our being as a congregation. It's a question of how we get individuals involved and interested. I think it's just basically kind of word of mouth and just kind of a sense of how we are saving.
Do you share feedback with them periodically with electric bills, or how much the solar panels are producing or anything like that? Do you have that kind of communication on a fairly regular basis?
That's not a priority. Our energy, it's not a priority that we're making, and it's at a high level, but it's kind of a thing that's kind of, we share it with individuals.
You're probably small enough that people just know what's going on in many ways. I got one more question. So with a 100-year-old building, did you actually go in and insulate walls and ceilings?
Yeah, we blew insulation in and insulated the attic, which was easy to do because it was an old 8x8 barn structure, building with it had 2x6 walls and so on, so that there was plenty of space there to do it. And that was done many years ago, because that was the first thing we did. We knew that that was one of the things we needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Dory, do you have any other questions from other people?
Yeah, John wanted to know how much were the solar panels worth, and whether or not you had any programs for your church members' own homes.
We had 2 or 3 members that got panels early on. But yeah, it's more individuals working on their own situations.
Well, I can just summarize a little bit then and just say from what I'm saying and what I'm hearing is there are things we can do, and what Dan said was it's little things, lots of little things add up to big things. And I know that's what's happened at my home. I know that's what happens at my congregation. And we at Hipple are just dying to help congregations do this. And we have this program called Thriving Faith Communities at this point. And we know how to do it. We have experience now over the last 10 years, basically, of how to save dramatic amounts of energy. I can speak for my congregation because I know it from our energy stewards numbers. We are over 50% reduction in our energy consumption. And and with our solar panels and not having had regular congregation meeting, church services for a year, we actually have a credit buildup of over 15,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So we're going to be able to coast through the next winter without much trouble. So this is all possible. If you want to know how to get involved with Hipple and get on the Thriving Faith Communities bandwagon, now's the time to do it. I'm going to turn it back to you, Dory.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you so much, Dan and Molly and George. It's really invigorating to hear that this work can be done and make such an impact and difference. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for participating. So a couple of things before we head out. One is that in the chat, I've posted the link if your congregation would like to sign up for Thriving Faith Communities. That's in there. Also, Dan mentioned another big part of energy efficiency work is transportation, and Hipple has been working on national transportation policy with the clean car standards. Later this month, the EPA is supposed to roll out the Biden administration's plan for clean car standards. We want to encourage them to fully create a standard that was without loopholes and very strong. So please sign on. There's a link for everyone to sign on, and then please send the faith leaders link to your clergy, and please ask them to sign on as well. We would really, really appreciate that. And then our next meeting will be on Wednesday, August 18th. Before we sign off, we also want to take a picture for social media, if that's okay. So I'm going to take myself off spotlight, and we'll all get in on a picture. Sarah will lead the charge on.
So Joe Bowling, are you there?
Yeah, if you can turn on your video for a second, that's great. If not, we understand.
Hey. Okay.
I'll do a countdown. So let me see here. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so wonderful. Well, we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, August 18th for our next call. And if you'd like to stay on, I'm sure, for a couple minutes and ask any other questions of our speakers, we'd love to have you also stay on and hang. So thank you for joining us.
May I ask Ray a question quickly?
Sure.
Ray, since we've just now filling out the form for energy stewards, could you connect with me as soon as possible about what we should start as our base year? Because we're wondering how to do that with having the pandemic, and and things that will be certainly different if we start right now. So perhaps you could give me some suggestion in an email or something.
Sure. Molly, did you want to say something about that? No. Okay. Yeah, I will be happy to, Lenore. I'll get with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
other questions? Jerome, I know you had a question before about carbon, maybe it was carbon offsets or something like that. If you, hold on, you're muted. So if you want to unmute and ask your question now.
Yes, the presentation about the energy efficiency mentioned carbon offsets as a way of managing their carbon footprint, and I was wondering what specific methods are you being used?
There, I think it comes down to well, there are various tools that I know some of my colleagues use to be able to estimate a carbon offset, and then there are various markets and places where they're being applied. I'm not that familiar with that world, so I'm just kind of observing from a little bit of afar. But that's, I know that consumer purchases, you can pay for carbon offset, and presumably that's going, and there are brokerage services that are supposed to kind of handle that and verify that indeed that that carbon offset was achieved and done. So that's kind of a whole nother realm of interactions, but that's clearly can support that movement towards clean energy as well.
Molly, what have you come up with so far?
There's a group called Carbon Neutral Indiana, and some of our members have done that, and I think they base it on the Berkeley. I can't remember. Berkeley has a
footprint. Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't recommended it for the church yet. We're looking at other options, or waiting to see kind of how his business goes. So that's the one we're looking at right now.
I can say for my congregation, so far we haven't approached it from that angle. We're going to try to get rid of all our gas furnaces, and we just had the second one of our air conditioners go bad, so we're replacing that with a heat pump. And this is an interesting little factoid. So I had two vendors give me prices on replacing this air conditioner with a heat pump. And first of all, they didn't listen to me when I said I want to save the furnace as a backup to the heat pump. And they came back with a price that said, well, we're going to put a new furnace in here. And so one price was like $12,500, and the other one was $9,500. And I was telling some of my geeky friends at church about this, and they said, that's nuts. So guess what? We're doing it ourselves. We purchased the heat pump, and it's going to be like $2,500. And there's some other miscellaneous things, but I suspect we'll have well under $4,000 invested in it, and we'll save at least $5,000 or more, and we'll get what we want. And that doesn't mean that this can be done by every congregation, but that's our plan. And I think after this one goes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more gas furnaces, and the plan is to get rid of them and probably go eventually with these low temperature heat pumps.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm afraid I have to sign off to go to
my
other obligation, but thanks. This was great. Really. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dory, is this a call being recorded?
It is, yes, and it will be available on our YouTube page. So we could share the link with you, Lenore.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you being on the call today. It's so good to see everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.